I want to talk about what's coming up with immigration, because we've learned that immigration raids are expected to ramp up this week. CBS News correspondent Lilia Luciano is in Chicago, one of the cities expected to be targeted. And Lilia, what have we learned?
Nora, good afternoon. What we have learned so far from ICE and from immigration officials is that we shall wait and see. Right now, we've heard from local community members, people who own businesses here, from undocumented immigrants and advocates, that there is a great sense of fear. We've heard from businesses who say, look, some of our workers are not showing up to work tomorrow because they are in fear of these mass deportations. We know that President Trump has said that he will begin the largest mass deportation in American history. But Tom Homan, the border czar, who will become the border czar, over the weekend and for weeks has been saying, look, we are not going to do these mass raids that are being reported, that they're going after people who are considered a national security or a public threat, and that the goal is to make sure that the people who they are detaining and the people who are going to be deported first are people who are under investigation by ICE. That said, that is not what the president has said throughout his campaign. So there is a great deal of fear and anxiety in these communities. What we have also learned today is that the first order of business is something we expected because of the way that the president described it throughout this campaign, was the end of the CBP One app. That is the app that people who seek asylum while in Mexico were able to use in order to have an appointment that is confirmed by the U.S. government and make their beginning of their claim for asylum at 8 different points of entry along the U.S.-Mexico border. Well, now that has ended, meaning that the tens of thousands of people who had appointments and are waiting on the Mexico side now no longer have that opportunity to make their case for asylum while being in the United States. And with that, they have potential eligibility to work in the meantime. What I thought was interesting, having covered for years the Trump administration's immigration policies, is that without the CBP One app, because you might remember the Biden administration had already shut down the possibility for people to make their case for asylum if they came into the U.S. between ports of entry, meaning without that appointment, is that now it's essentially like going back to the Remain in Mexico policy, where there is no possibility for people to right now show up at the border with an appointment in between ports of entry and try to make their claim for asylum legally. And this policy, the CBP One app, has allowed for nearly 1 million people to enter the U.S. Under the Biden administration.
That is a big change today, as Lilia mentioned, there in Chicago, where some of these immigration raids could start as soon as tomorrow. Thank you, Lilia. I want to bring in CBS News correspondent Omar Villafranca. He is in El Paso, Texas, near the U.S.-Mexico border. And I know you could hear Lilia as well. What are you hearing about the real-world impact for some of these migrants who are seeking asylum?
Well, at this point here on the El Paso side, it's hurry up and wait. Now, of course, when President Trump was sworn in, the CBP One app, which is something that migrants would use to try to get some sort of meeting, I screen capped here what it was showing. It says effective January 20th, 2025, the functionalities of CBP One that previously allowed undocumented aliens to submit info and schedule appointments at ports of entry no longer available. Existing appointments have been canceled. We've seen on social media that some people who are waiting on the other side trying to get those appointments, they're just in tears. They're crying. That was part of what the incoming Trump administration, now the president, wanted to kind of control things at the border. Another thing that I want to bring up, in my travels across the U.S.-Mexico border from Texas all the way to California, with the president wanting to declare cartels a terrorist organization, I had Republican and Democratic sheriffs along the border telling me they were a little bit worried about that, partially because they're worried if they're calling those cartels a terrorist organization, they're wondering if people in Mexico or living in those areas of Mexico would now have some sort of asylum claim to try to come to the U.S., saying that they are fleeing terrorism. How that plays out in the court of law, of course, we're going to have to wait and see. The last thing I want to mention is declaring an emergency at the border, which the president said he wanted to do with an executive order. Wants to send the U.S. military. Here in Texas, the U.S. military, the Texas National Guard, is already here. They have been here on the border since 2021 as part of Texas's Operation Lone Star. As of right now, The Texas government is footing that bill, and Governor Greg Abbott here in Texas has been hinting he's hoping the federal government will take over some of that payment. But Tom Homan, the incoming border czar, has said repeatedly in his trips to Texas that we've seen him that he wants to make Texas the model for what the border should look like on the southern border. And you're talking Humvees, you have armed soldiers and concertina wire all across the border. Greg Abbott is a Republican, but in New Mexico, Arizona, and California, there are Democratic senators. So how that plays out, we're going to have to wait and see. Nora?
Oh, it's well put. Omar Villafranca, thank you for explaining all of that. President Trump promising today to use the muscular power of not only the executive office, but to employ soldiers to carry out this immigration crackdown. He will be signing those executive orders shortly. And as we learn more details, we'll bring them to you. We're going to continue this conversation in just a moment. You're watching CBS News coverage of Donald Trump's inauguration. We'll be right back.